Sounds good.
All right, Metro Life Church, this is rare. I'm actually hosting one of our quarantine calls. Normally, Pastor Steve jumps on with one of his buddies, and today I'm on with one of my buddies, Anthony Tuero, who is one of the best leaders we got here in the church. He serves in a variety of ways. He was our young adult director for a long time, and now he is serving on the youth ministry leadership team, and so he gets to minister and speak alongside his beautiful wife, Diana. And they joined our youth ministry team, and we're just so thankful to have them. And today's going to be fun. We're going to talk a little bit about something very specific. And Anthony, why don't you take a moment to greet yourself and tell everybody what you do?
Sure. So, hey, Metro Life Church family, I'm so honored to be here talking with everyone today. And basically, I'm Anthony. I work with people with disabilities. So I'm constantly working with people with developmental disabilities such as autism, Down syndrome. Some have spinal bifida, different things like that. But that is a temporary job because I'm currently about to graduate with my master's degree in pastoral counseling. So I've been doing a lot of studying about psychology and just different things about counseling, obviously to help me when I get the opportunity to start counseling others, but also just in leading, being able to counsel people through this time, a lot of our youth, a lot of our young adults, with a lot of things that are going on. So it's been an interesting time, but that's pretty much what I do, and that's what I love to do. I love counseling. So.
Well, I have my bachelor's in psychology, so we connect on that level a lot, and we love going back and forth talking about that. And one of the reasons why we're talking today is to talk about that side of things, the mental health side of what we're going through here in quarantine. I was watching the news a couple of weeks ago, and this was before we went into like real hardcore another 30 days. They were already talking about the post-traumatic stress that people will be experiencing as a result of this. And so we need to be having discussions about the psychological effects that this season will have on us. And, just from my experience with counseling and all that, I just remember one of the biggest things they taught us is the first step to taking steps in your mental health is recognizing that you've gone through something, that you need this. If you're stuck in, I shouldn't need this, I shouldn't struggle this much, there's a barrier to you actually looking at what you're afraid of and getting over it. And you and I said this on the phone earlier, mental health issues, for the most part, you're not born with, they're developed. And so it starts somewhere and then becomes something because we're just thinking the wrong thoughts. And so we're going to have a discussion today about the thoughts we should be thinking and the psychological effects that everything we're going through right now could have on us. So why don't you speak to that for a second? You've done some research to prepare for this call. What are some of the psychological effects that people are going to be experiencing as a result of COVID-19?
Yeah, so the biggest thing, of course, and I think this is something that's always plagued our society, the biggest thing is the stress and the anxiety that's going to come with, there's been stress and anxiety that has come pre-quarantine, during the quarantine, and there's going to be also stress and anxiety post-quarantine. And basically, like you said, I was doing some research before the call, and there was one psychologist who called it an epidemic of anxiety. And it couldn't be so true because, just now we've all been anxious, the fight or flight response. When they first talked about quarantine, everybody ran to the streets, Publix, Walmart, everything. Toilet paper was gone for whatever reason. And that just shows what stress and anxiety does when you don't know what's going on. You panic. And that's actually one of the stages. There's this thing called, we all know the stages of grief, but there's also now something that they've developed called the stages of coping. And the first stage of coping is panic. And that's what we saw during, once they started saying around mid-March, hey, there may be a lockdown, everybody went into panic because they had no idea what they were doing. And their fight or flight response was, let's go. We don't know what's going on, but let's hoard toilet paper. Let's hoard, meat, just like kind of like a hurricane. But when there's an unknown aspect to something, you don't know what to do, so there's mass panic. And I've always compared what's going on now to hurricanes. Why are people going so nuts when a hurricane can potentially be even worse than what we're going through right now, because it affects a very small area and there's mass destruction. You know, now we're kind of just waiting around to see who gets it, who doesn't. A hurricane, there's mass destruction, and you don't see the panic, you don't see the craziness, the chaos like we've seen with this quarantine. And that's what happens when there's something that we don't know about, we don't have information about. You just get that stress and anxiety, and it goes to another level. And now it's not just something that you're feeling on a personal level, but it's everywhere around you, you know. And I feel like a lot of the things that are going to happen, like just right now, and I feel like this is PTSD for me. We have termites in our home, so we got to put the tent up and we got to do all that stuff. And the gentleman that was going to check the house was here when we got home, and I went to shake his hand, and he was like, "Whoa, no." And I was like, for a moment there, I thought, what did I do wrong that like he doesn't want to shake my hand? Like, what's going on? But then I realized, oh wait, you know, with the virus and everything, we have to be careful. And Deanna, my wife, just said, you know, that's just going to be an effect of what's going on. You know, people have another reason to be rude, or people have another reason to just be so cautious that they don't want to interact and things like that. And I feel like that's going to be another issue where it's going to be like, hey, you know, when can we say hi to each other again? When can we give hugs again? When can we shake hands? And all of that just creates a lot of stress and anxiety on top of, hey, I was directly affected by the virus because I got it, or a family member got it, or someone close got it. I was directly affected because I lost my job, because I lost money in the stock market. My business had to shut down because of this. So all of that just adds to what that psychologist said of the epidemic of anxiety. So I feel like after all this is over, that's what we're going to have. A lot of more people just overly stressed, overly anxious because of all the panic and chaos that we've had with COVID-19.
Well, you said a lot there that we would really have to kind of speak to. I mean, you know, there's a 5 stages of grief. You know, it ends with acceptance. You said here that there's 6 stages to coping now, which is kind of more specific to what we're going through. There's an aspect of getting reacclimated to life. And you said that the first stage of that is panic, which actually makes me feel good, because it makes me think, okay, this is a pretty normal response, which means there's a process that we're all in.
Yeah.
And we're going through the process. You know, the stages of grief, sometimes you get stuck, but for the most part, those stages just take place. You move through them and they happen and you keep going. And that we are going through a process. And there are supposed to be things that die. There are supposed to be things that are strengthened. There are supposed to be things that we give up on. And right now we're going through a process. Something hit us. It was tragic. But now we're going through it. And I remember one time I was talking to somebody in the counseling field, and they told me that they've stopped using the word closure in counseling. And now they try to work towards change. And not actually changing the scenario, but changing the person. And that speaks to what you just said so much. These stages of coping, what we're going through, we don't need to wait until things change. We need to change. We need to be smart. We need to go through it, because even if they come out tomorrow, in a month, in 2 months, hey, we're all good, move forward, we're going to be the ones dealing with the psychological effects of what's going on. The fear of a worker just walked into my house. What if he has some disease? I don't even know if we're going to go back to looking at normal germs the same way, because now I'm afraid to touch my car gas tank nozzle thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what? We have this fear. And while you and I were talking on the phone earlier about this, you know, you use that term. It's an epidemic of anxiety and fear. And we talked about the mindsets that underlie the thought processes that we have, the belief systems that become the mindsets, that become the thoughts we're thinking. And we talked a little bit about the mindset that says, I'm not safe.
Yeah.
And how that just bubbles and balloons into something. Doesn't matter what the context is, it can take over our life. Why don't you speak to, for a couple of minutes, speak to the belief systems that we all have to address right now?
Yeah, so definitely, one of the biggest things that I've seen with the whole quarantine and everything is the use of the term social distancing. And I know, at Metro, we've said, no, it's not social distancing, it's physical distancing, because we still want to be social with each other. We still want to be able to connect with each other. And so I think that is going to be a big issue in society when we're done with this. It's a big issue now. And the reason why I say that is because you have people that are in their homes, they're lonely. You have people that are living on their own, some maybe having family issues or whatnot, and they're lonely. And right now, what's going on is because you have time to be at home and there really aren't distractions where you can go outside, you can go out to a restaurant, you can go to the mall, you can go to the movies, whatever, you have to stay at home. What happens is we begin to ruminate on things. We begin to get deeper in our thoughts of certain things. And a lot of the times, I feel like it's our human nature. We focus on the negative rather than on the positive. And that's where our belief systems start to kind of get into, they get into the role that they need to play. And if you have the wrong belief systems in place, then that's going to eat at you and you're going to start to fall into depression. And what happens is we need to make sure that our belief systems are built on a solid foundation. And so, I tell people all the time, listen, I can help you only as much as you allow God into your life. Because I feel I did an internship for my bachelor's degree at a psychology center, and it was totally secular. God was not involved, and I felt like I was just putting band-aids on people, and it was horrible because I saw the deep issues that they had, but I couldn't address them because they were God issues. And so I felt like I was only putting band-aids on that at one point would either fall off or be taken off, and that wound isn't going to heal. And so I feel like that's what people need now. They need a belief system that's the solid foundation is Jesus to get them through this. To even when we come out of this quarantine, like you said, that we're out, that, when is it normal again to just say hi to each other, to touch things without having that PTSD of, are there germs on this? All of that, we're going to be able to cope with it and deal with it and feel comfortable with it if we have a solid foundation built on who Jesus is and that belief system.
So are you saying that even in the midst of a pandemic and everything going on, even in the midst of that we have the answer to getting past all of that, and that answer is just the same exact faith we were operating in before all this happened?
Exactly that. That's all you need.
You see, here's what I love about that. I think to say it that simply is because it is that simple. And I don't believe depression is a physical state. I believe it's a mental state that has an effect on your body. Yep. After a while, it begins to affect you physically. So it starts with thoughts that you allow yourself to think. The clinical definition of depression is the state that believes all that has been is all that will be. So if there is a belief system in our mind that says all that has been is all that will ever be, that is a mental state of depression. That starts to affect us physically. Yep. Well, then the way to combat that is a thought.
Yep.
And that thought to what has been is all that will be. We'll never get out of this. Life will never be the same. I'll never be happy. The way to combat that is to go at it with a thought. And those thoughts are the things that our faith has supplied us from the very beginning.
Yep.
More than conquerors. When I want to sit back and say, all that has been is all that will ever be, I remind myself that Christ says I'm more than a conqueror. He says he'll make a way when there is no way. So the minute I start to feel like there's no way out of this, I'm in a prime position to be used by God and to watch him do something. So you're actually saying that even in the psychological realm, the answer to all of this is a belief system deep down that says Christ is still King of Kings and still Lord of Lords, and everything he has said that we listened to in church and hollered and screamed and shout before all this, that all still rings true today. It's all still applicable today. Is that what you're saying, Anthony Tuero?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And we have the example of Elijah. When Elijah, when they're coming after him that he's going to die, he goes out to a mountain, he isolates himself. And I feel like at that moment he was depressed because he said, listen, I did all of this and this lady is still coming after me to kill me. You know, God, just end me. That's it. Everything is as good as it'll ever be, and nothing else is going to change. So God, I'm done. Take me up. Take me with you. And God says, hey, I'm not done with you yet. It's not time for you to have your life taken. It's not time for you to give up. It's not time for you to have this mindset of defeat. It's time for you to have a mindset of victory, because I'm not done with you yet. And you're going to come out victorious. And not only are you going to come out victorious, but the biggest thing is that my name will be glorified because I got you out of this. And that's what I feel like is happening now. You know, we may feel depressed, we may feel lonely, we may feel isolated, we may have these belief systems that are negative belief systems, which we shouldn't have, but God is saying, hey, I'm not done with you yet. If you could only fix your eyes on me and see what I'm doing and what I'm going to do through you, you'd see that you are victorious.
So what do you think some of the belief systems that have to be changed are? Because I can tell you one that I've experienced. It's the subconscious belief that I'm not safe. And what I have to tell myself, the way I combat it is by saying, there may be dangerous things out there, but I have a God that will either protect me or use it for my good.
Yeah.
What are some of the other belief systems that we may face as a result of COVID-19?
Well, I feel like the biggest thing that is a weed in our belief system is the belief of control. And what I mean by that is, listen, we so many times focus on the things that we can't control, and those are the things that cause stress and anxiety. I can't control where there's germs. I can't control that. There's nothing that I can do. I can't control whether another person wants to wear a mask or not. I can't control whether another person wants to stand 6 feet away from me or an inch away from me. I can't control any of that. What I can control is what I believe and what I do with myself. So the belief of, you know, what you said, I'm not safe. Can you control that? To a certain extent, you can. And how? By wearing a mask, making sure that when you're out in public, you're constantly sanitizing your hands. When you're out in public, making sure that you're keeping your distance from people. Those are things that you can control. You can't control others, but you can control yourself. So that belief of wanting to control everything, that has to go away, and you have to say, okay, I can only control what I can control, so that's what I'm going to do. And the rest, I'm leaving that up to God. I'm trusting that if I have to go to Publix, if I have to go to Walmart to do my groceries, I'm going to protect myself and I'm going to do what I have to do to stay safe, but I'm going to trust God for everything else, and God's going to get me through this. And so, you know, that belief system of, will God get me through this? Yes, he will. And I feel like that's the main issue, that sometimes people believe, yeah, God is good, but can he get me through this? And the answer is yes. There's a whole book written about how we'll get you through it, and how you will be a conqueror, and how you will get through this, and how God will carry you through it. So I feel that belief system of, can God do it, needs to change from can God do it to yes, he can.
You know, I'm just sitting back, and as you bring up the Bible, I'm thinking, wait a minute, man, they went through droughts, they went through plagues. There's a 400-year period where they didn't hear the voice of God.
Yep.
There are people on the earth that watched Jesus be crucified.
Yep.
I'm not belittling what's happening, but we can't belittle what happened to them either.
Exactly.
And, you know, as you say that, to kind of wrap up what we're discussing today, I think it's huge. I think the first thing that people really need to do when they hang up and they stop watching this and they move on is they have to accept that they've been through something.
Agreed.
They have to accept that their family members have been through something.
Yeah.
You cannot say, well, my kids should be better. They shouldn't be reacting. Look, they have this big house. They should be fine. No, everyone has gone through something that in some way is traumatic. We've all watched our world halt.
Yeah.
We've all watched it halt. Whether it's a 14-year-old's social world that halted or it's your entire business that just stopped. That's a big deal to each of those people. So we've all been through something.
Mm-hmm.
The second point that I hear you make is we have to recognize that there's another battle coming, and it's not just an invisible battle against a disease, but there's this invisible battle against fear, anxiety, and all that.
Yeah.
I go back to that song we used to sing, I'm no longer a slave to fear, I'm a child of God. If we're operating in fear, we are becoming its slave. There's no way to let fear in a little bit without becoming a slave to it. So now, in the third point, we have to address our mindsets, our belief systems, and this is where our faith is tested.
Yep.
Even in psychology, really, I know a lot of people may not really value the psychological realm or the world, but to me, all it does is solidify and back up what Christ says about what goes on. Yep. All it does is it just gives us a glimpse of what God is saying and how it affects us on a molecular level. And so I think we're on the complete same page here. Accept it, but recognize we're in a process, and the way to win is in our faith. You have any closing comments before we dismiss?
So I would say, the biggest thing that you should be focusing on right now is how to stay mentally healthy. And the way you do that is, number one, reading your word and being in prayer, making sure that you're connected to the power source, and that power source is God. Number two, make sure you have a good support system around you. Make sure you have a good family members around you, good friends around you, a church community that is around you. Make sure that you're connecting with people on a daily basis, because isolation is not what God wants in this time. He wants us to be connected, and thankfully, God has given us the resources to stay connected during this time. And three is to continue to believe that we will get through this, and when we get out the other side, we're going to come out stronger than when we went into this. So those would be my closing comments for this time.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure and it was an honor. I loved it.
Love it, man. I'll see you. Thank you.
All right, PC. Love you, man.
Later.